I think when I was like 17, maybe, I took this like Tumblr quiz, and I was
it's all like, about am I gay?
Yeah,
oh my
goodness. The little like
am I millennial? We're gonna understand this.
Literally,
like BuzzFeed Tumblr quizzes.
Yeah. What did you think when we first said, like, hey, want to come on this podcast? Like, what was your first impression of hearing What I Wish My Parents Knew series?
I thought it was intriguing for sure. When you mentioned like talking about like queerness and all that kind of stuff, that's always right up my alley. And then the parent part, I was like, oh, I don't know. What would I want my mom to do different? It's important to talk about, I think. I see like how my best friend parents, and she's doing exactly what I would want my mom to do. But I thought it was really cool. I was really excited when you mentioned it. I was.
And you're a godparent. Godparents unite.
Yeah. We're like all healing each other's inner child by raising this kid together. All four of us kind of. And I'm like, you're the mom that I wish I had.
Do you have a good relationship with your mom? Or do you have...
Yeah. It's gotten a lot better, I will say. The coming out part was great. Rest stuff, not so good. But we have a much better relationship than we have in the past. We've definitely worked on it.
I thought one thing about my mom when I was little, living in her house. I thought one thing about my mom as a teen. I thought
like
a different
changes.
thing in my early 20s. And I feel differently now heading into my 30s. That just is less about my mom and more about my healing, my perspectives, like how I can see her differently, the space I can offer. And as I mature, like things I would handle different that I'm like, maybe no one had ever talked to her about it, or she didn't have that community.
I feel like a lot of people always want to say like, oh, this is what I wish my parent wanted to do differently. They automatically think my parent was a horrible parent.
Yeah.
But in reality, it could just be like, oh, I wish they would have done this differently. Not that I had a bad relationship or I had a horrible childhood or anything like that. It just means I think maybe you doing this or this and this may have made a little bit of a difference, or may have made me feel a little different or more seen. Yeah. That doesn't mean like it's bad parenting. It's more of like, I just really felt like this could have helped me.
Like always improving. It feels almost like a performance evaluation at work where your initial instinct is like that I feel threatened. I don't really want to hear this. I don't want you to give me feedback on what I could have done different or better. But I think in a supportive environment where if you like your boss and you trust your supervisor or your boss, a performance evaluation can be like a very, very revelatory, supportive conversation where they're like, hey, here's our 2 cents. Here's where you killed it. Like, here's where you're thriving. Here's how we're going to acknowledge that. Here's some areas that we're trying to clarify expectations, like asking clarifying questions. Do you know your job description? Do you whatever? It feels kind of like that. Like the initial thought is like, what I wish my parents knew. It's like, okay, so great. Here we are again with the narrative that parents are messing everything up. And I'm like, that's maybe the initial gut feeling that can come to mind, which is a lot of like defensiveness or fear or like, I'm just doing the best I can.
They always tell you like start off with the good, and maybe that will help like your parents. But then I also too, it might just be the parent, because there are some parents, even if you start off with the good, as soon as you say the negative, it's like, it's well over. Then maybe I shouldn't have had you, maybe I shouldn't have had you. Maybe you should have been born. Maybe I should have just left you. I'm like,
you should have just had a different mom because I just did everything wrong apparently. And I'm like, man, I wish it didn't have to go there. My parent doesn't have those statements, but that's common. I think
it's very, very
like,
common.
I'm feeling triggered, and I think that's easy to feel that way as a parent because you kind of give your all. Even if you're doing it the wrong way, like the parents that I associate with are like putting it all on the line. And Gabby works in wraparound services for foster youth.
We partner with DFACS to provide education support for kids in foster care, just making sure that they are treated the same way. I think a lot of schools like to kind of treat them a lot differently, and it's a lot more advocacy that goes into it. And also like making sure like kids in foster care get the cute school supplies they want, and they get the nice book bag, and they get to go to prom and all their senior trips. They can go on all the senior trips. They can pay their senior dues.
Being able to be in band, have band
chorus,
fees, or buy an
track.
instrument.
Yeah. So like we support them that kind of way.
A lot of people don't think about stuff like that.
No,
until because
like
I've had prom is a big deal,
prom dress?
Huge, and the prom dress you want. And like that you
not just a prom dress like you could afford because that's the money you got,
and the hair you want, and the hair is big now, so like the wig you want, like it's the nails you want, all that kind of stuff.
For me as a kid, because I live from Jersey, and prom was supposed to be you spent as much on your prom that you kind of would have spent like on a wedding.
Wow.
Oh yeah, you would have like before you went to school, like went to your prom dance or whatever.
Yeah.
You would have a whole fashion show. It would be at the middle school. They would have this red carpet.
Oh, wow.
And then all the people before you went to your prom, you would come and you show all your dresses on this like little red carpet thing. You would spend a lot of money to be able to like go to prom. And so I think it's important
if you were
that
in a household that didn't have Like the foster parents are just like, nope.
No,
And then
Not in
they're
this
supposed
house.
to get like clothing allowances, but that's always
up to the discretion of the foster parent,
and doesn't always come in time and things like that. So being able to get a girl like the prom dress she wants, and especially when the kids aren't expecting it, like when they're like, oh wait, I can like get that dress, like I can do this, and it's really nice. Just trying to help where I can, because I know there's like tons of other factors that they're going through, but like if I can get you the really nice book bag, then
make it feel like a normal childhood, like little bits and pieces of it. And that's really important for kiddos to have. Children who are in the foster care and then LGBT foster kids that they like are caring for. A lot of kids are feeling like they'll be kicked out. They have to hide it.
Lack of safety.
There's such a lack of safety, because also you don't know. And when you go into a foster home, you're hoping that that's hopefully like the last home you go into besides reunification if you're going back with your parents. But you want to just be as quote unquote good as possible, as quote unquote normal as possible. I don't want to have any issues, so I'm just not gonna like toe the line. I'm not gonna be myself.
Any feathers.
Yeah, and so they don't get to be themselves. And if they are themselves, and that's a problem. And I don't know, it makes it really tough for youth in foster care. But I don't want to misspeak, but I believe that youth in foster care who are LGBTQ plus have like such higher rates of homelessness, such higher rates of abuse and
mental health
neglect
crisis.
And
Self-harm, suicidality.
Yeah.
She does LGBTQ trainings and facilitation at her place of employment. Having been from that community and like lecturing on that or giving
like just mostly like trainings and things like that to specifically state office workers, whether it's like case managers, even foster parents sometimes too. But yeah, so like mostly just like trainings, like how to be nice to like queer kids that you work with.
Such a challenging topic.
Yeah,
apparently it is.
I just try to, I don't know, educate as many people as I can. And there's a lot of pushback. We don't always get crowds that want to be there. And we don't always get case managers that want to listen. It is really nice to see that light bulb go off for some people and be like, oh, okay. That
just those
makes
few
sense.
You can connect with, because then they're offering a safer space to the kids that they're case managers for.
That's all we
or whatever.
want.
How do you bridge the topic of like, I'd like to present some information to you, but it's not the only right way or like the one right way? Do you ever address that in your speaking, or what do you think about that?
So I think we make a lot of disclaimers of like, there's not one way. Like every kid that you have on your caseload is not the same kid. Every situation is not the same situation. We just want to, as best as possible, give you some kind of like tangible way to support that kid best. And of course, there's your own discretion, there's nuance, all those kind of things.
I've been to some of those trainings.
Oh, really?
And some of those trainings are very religious,
yes,
and very has to be very like, this is the way, and like your home is gonna be like this. And of course, if your home is better than the home that they came from, you should want them to stay with you instead of like trying to reunify. And it makes me really frustrated, because it's like they're thinking like, oh, because I'm part of a religion and because I've got money and because we're a 2-parent household and all these other reasons, our home is better. Ideal. And they're thinking of these children as they're so lucky to have you. I don't like, and they're so better off than their first families. And I don't like that idea. Drew and I remember one conference we went to, they prayed. And like in the middle of it was like, and I felt so awkward. And like, I am a Christian woman. And I'm like, this is not church. We should be learning about how to better serve these children and be better adoptive parents and foster parents. And you're here, like, this is not church. Yeah. I don't feel like we should have had a prayer right in the middle of this. And then the very last speaker, she had us pray, and then I pulled out her Bible and then read verses from her Bible and explained how what we were doing
was like being Jesus's hands on earth.
Yes.
Yes.
And while even as a Christian woman, I felt like it was very harmful because it's this way of like, okay, your home is really good and Jesus and Heavenly Father blessed you. But like, what about the other homes? Why are we blessed and not them? And why are we talking about it in a way that's making it seem like Jesus didn't love them enough to bless them in a way where we seem so high and mighty? And I just didn't like that. I think in a way it should have been really separate. It should have been more about the education and the numbers and access to resources, all of that, more than using religion in a way to justify the reasons why we've become adoptive parents or foster parents. And also a lot, like, even though I am a Christian woman, there could have been other people who are not Christian based who went there to learn, who were bombarded with this. And it also could push them away from doing the good work of becoming foster parents. Because I talk a lot about how I feel like we need more Black families and we need more LGBT families becoming foster parents or becoming adoptive parents, because I know the numbers and like those are the children in there that if they have someone who's able to mirror them, they don't feel they feel less lonely, right? Yeah. It's the same reason why I think it's really important for my daughter who is white to have mirrors for her, that I think these children should also have it in the families that are taking them in as well. Yeah. And we just don't. And I know it's not in a way of saying like Black families that they're not doing some type of adopting, but it's very different. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I don't want to say at a smaller scale, but it is just different in the traditional way of fostering and adopting that I think a lot of Black families should be doing maybe more of like the traditional adopting or fostering through the system to help more children. Because I think it's a lot of the times it's just like, oh, the neighbor or your family member, which I think should be done. It should be done. So I'm not trying to say that shouldn't be done. But I think in addition to helping other families, because I think then we would have children who would benefit from it in the end.
Mm-hmm. And when it comes to like being intersectional and like, you know, supporting all children, there could be more Black families that also aren't accepting of like LGBTQ plus youth. And I've worked with a lot of them who do have that more religious background. That's also a major gap too.
Some of the families I work with in the same realm, their faith is what offers them resilience. It's what offers them compassion and like the drive to, so those children are like what, in police stations and in the DFACS office sleeping on the floor, or being raised in like a really religious, what, like maybe they're being microaggression or macroaggression harmed in that home, but are they not on the office of the DFACS office? Like that's always so hard. And how do we do advocacy in the spaces that we're in? Gina saying like, hey, maybe after this conference, I'm going to circle back and say, I loved the conference. Here's what I learned. It was challenging for me that we prayed. Gabby offering more like non-denominationally based trainings at conferences like that, and just like for LGBTQ kids, trying to bridge the gaps and not say it's not that you're not doing a good job or you're not doing enough, but let's consider all of the impact of how we're approaching your role as a foster parent.
I think one of the things that I feel a lot of people want to say is, oh, well, if, like you said, well, do we want them sleeping on the floor at DFACS or do we want them in a home? We shouldn't be thinking of like either or, right? We should be thinking, well, we shouldn't have to think it has to be either they sleep there or in your home. Why don't we find a way of like we teaching you how to better be a better foster parent where you're welcoming to all other, like all people. Why does it have to be they're sleeping in DFACS or they can't be in your home? Why can't it be you're more open to learning more and adjusting your
and why is that that shouldn't even be an option? That shouldn't even be something that we're comparing it to. They could be sleeping on, like, no, that they should never, that should never be a thing. They should never be sleeping there. That should not even be allowed.
Yeah. Which is where we are currently in our system.
In this county right here, because this is part of the county we are from, I'm not going to say it, but it's a big problem. My husband told me they spent, I want to say $60,000 or $600,000 on hotels.
Oh, that's
huge issue. Common. It's such a big issue. Yeah, and in the counties that I work with too, it's such a big issue. So many kids in hotels.
Just staying in a hotel. Yeah, staying in hotels because there's no families that can take them in. Yeah, and so they have like one adult per how many kids that they're
like a lot.
And it's a lot. And so then they've got each kid assigned to like a hotel room. Yeah, and then that kid by themselves is living at a hotel room. And then maybe going to school.
Not in school
usually
districts.
That's a big issue, is that they're not in school because they're not in the district. And then also the fact that being in a hotel is supposed to be super temporary when it's not. So it's like, do we enroll them where they are in this hotel right now? Do we not? I mean, we're always on the side of get them into school. But I could imagine like you don't have a family to come home to, like doing your homework. Like no one's there to like make you lunch. No one's there to
There's not
like,
a kitchen. There's no access. It's like,
I guess they are trying to work on it in the counties that I work with, but it is a huge issue. And I can't imagine being in those kids' positions.
And then trafficking too, because they're in hotels and people who can tell like, hey, these kids are vulnerable.
Peak vulnerable.
Yes. Yeah. And so you have this one person for how many kids who's probably just really trying just to make it. Like, it's not like they're purposely being neglectful, but it's hard to take care of a lot of kids. My husband told me that they had to move around hotels a bunch because it was such a huge, not to be a huge target, because people were like, hey, we can traffic them really easily. It's super, we can offer these things to them. Yeah. And like, there's no one really like there to take care of them because this person who's taking care of them is managing so many kids that they got to the point when they had to move around hotels just so that these kids were not in harm's way.
It's like the populations that fall through the cracks
Yeah.
so easily. And to compound things, if any of those kids are even more marginalized, like foster kids, definitely. Foster kids of color, even more. Foster kids that are LGBTQ of color is like this really niche, or even not of color, but adding in that orientation or gender identity component is like just complicates things to the next level.
For sure.
Because you're at the mercy of not just the system and like access to resources, but the personal preferences or religious preferences of your caseworker, of your supervisor, of whatever, to where are you going to be safe? Are you going to be treated the same? Are you going to have what you need? How do we make those spaces more supportive? If you're in a role that's touching children's lives, they don't have to be foster kids, like any kiddo. What does it look like to make an environment for someone who has that sort of identity or is exploring that sort of identity safer? A point that I had put down that I'd love to hear both of your thoughts on, and that I would really be fascinated what different listeners of the podcast feel, is what makes someone LGBTQ. Is that something that someone is influenced into? Is it how they're born? Do you become more aware of who you are because of what you're exposed to or how someone talked to you about it? Or is it just like nature, nurture? What are the ratios here, and are there ratios? I have my thoughts and I'm happy to share, but I'm just, what do you guys think? What makes someone queer or part of the LGBT community?
My friends who are queer, who come out to me, and they'll tell me little moments like, oh, did you recognize this or seen this? That makes me realize, oh my goodness, this has always been like a part of them. This has always been something that it's been there and that I just didn't see because I'm straight. So then I only think of something in a like very like straight mind.
You're like, that was off my radar.
Yeah. Oh, I had a friend who like she came out to me and she was really surprised and really scared. And she was like, oh, you don't remember that moment or like this moment? I was like, yeah, but like I didn't think anything of it. I never really cared if she was or not. Yeah. She was still who she was. That I think that's also maybe why I was kind of like that person who was blind to it.
Yeah.
But her mentioning all those little moments, or even my brother-in-law, him telling me a lot of stories of him as a kid, and my husband telling me lots of little stories about his brother. When he came out to them, they're all like, oh, finally.
Of course.
Right?
So you're leaning on the side of like nature. Like that is just the person.
It's just
who they are.
Yes. I also feel like preferences in a way can sometimes be nature or nurture both.
Yeah.
Because I think of things that have influenced me.
I agree.
To be attracted to certain people can also be. So not like in the sense of maybe gender, but like I think about my husband and like how I really like darker hair and really, really tall guys and maybe a little bit smaller than me kind of thing. Like I dated a lot of guys like that. Not to say I didn't date other guys. Dated guys of different races. I even dated a guy that was shorter than me. So it's not like I stayed within my preference all the time. But the majority would always be like some skinny guy, could be white or black with dark hair and really, really tall.
Yeah.
And like could eat like a whole bunch and like never gain weight kind of thing. Like always went for very niche. I know, whatevs. But I think about that, and that could also be a nature and nurture thing. But like when I think about me being straight, I never thought about it. I felt like it was something that was always there, which is something I hear from a lot of my queer friends. It was just always there. That attraction was always there.
But you're talking about, what I'm hearing is like the nurture part is if no one was giving you the language, you were never seeing it anywhere, even though it's always there, it wasn't manifesting or even consciously acknowledged because the world you were brought up in was queer absent. Like there, I'm not seeing this. No one even told me that it would feel a certain way to be attracted to a certain person or to not identify as cisgendered, however I'm born, right? Like,
and that's why I would think it's a little bit of both for myself. I would say nature for sure. Like I don't think there was something I watched that made me gay. I don't think there was like a specific influence or something on TV. Exactly. But I would say like the society and the things that I surrounded myself with maybe made it more comfortable to come out, maybe made me feel more safe. And I do think that people can be influenced as far as like maybe how they present themselves or, even like style. If you are LGBTQ community, like what you want to wear, things like that, like you can be influenced in those ways. I don't know if you can be influenced that heavily into your attraction or like, how you identify, I guess. But I do think organic, like society can influence how you portray yourself or how you present, things like that. And I think it's true. Like if you grew up with the language, if you grew up around other like queer people, then maybe
Normalizing it.
the way you present it, or maybe how early you come out is different, or the safety around it is different, but not around who you are as a person.
And what was
if
that like
makes
for
sense.
you? I don't know if I've ever even asked you. We've been friends for the past
I know.
4 years.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I've ever asked like what age you were, when it was first your consciousness was starting to be developed around being queer, your queer identity. And then what was the process and age and timeline like for sharing that publicly or with other people privately or whatever?
I've been asked that question before, like what age, and I really don't remember. I remember like watching stuff and being attracted to, like, I don't know if y'all have seen like Stick It, the movie. It's like about this like gymnast.
The Disney movie?
No, not the Disney one. It was like
the one with the girl with the gymnastics.
Yes. I remember seeing that, and this there's this scene at the beginning where she's like running and like she's taking her clothes off, but like so you can see that she's a girl because you couldn't tell at the beginning that she was a girl. And I was like, oh. It's like I was like, she's I was like, okay. And then like I noticed little things, but I think when I was like 17 maybe, I took this like Tumblr quiz, and
it's all like, about am I gay?
Oh my goodness.
The little like
am I understand this
literally
like BuzzFeed Tumblr quizzes.
Yes, because I think that's when I was like, oh, like maybe I am. Like, who knows? I was a theater kid. Like, it wasn't that different. Like, it wasn't too much of a weird thing. And so I took the quiz, and it said, like, pansexual or something. And I was like, okay, cool. I think the first person I came out to actually was my boyfriend at the time, which is so wild. I know. He was like my best friend. Like, we were so close, and he was my boyfriend. And I remember being like, yeah, so I took this quiz, and, you know, it said this. And he was really cool about it. He was like, okay, like, cool. Yeah, like that's cool. Like, and then we didn't talk about it a ton. Like, I mean, I was able to like be more open. And then my friends, we were all kind of trying to explore ourselves around that time. So like coming out wasn't too awkward. I still had to come out, but it wasn't too awkward.
It wasn't like a big announcement. Did you just have like little conversations?
Yeah, it was kind of like little conversations. But then at the time we were all learning, so people were asking me, oh, like, so when are you gonna date a girl? When are you gonna do this? Like, blah, blah, blah. And so I had to figure out what that meant for myself. But then coming out to my mom specifically, I will say was actually really great, which I didn't think it would be, because growing up she was pretty like homophobic in a way. She would say certain things, and I would play like Frank Ocean a lot, and she was like, oh, I used to like him, but he's gay, so I don't want you to like play him for me anymore. And I was like, what? It's still so good.
Little
things, and I don't think she's ever noticed that it ever like affected me.
Yeah.
And so then as I got older, I would try to educate her in small ways. This is what this means, and that just means you like someone else, and blah blah. And so I was trying to like teach her, and then once I was like, okay, so I think if I came out, she may be okay. So like went to dinner one time. She came visit me at my dorm. Went to dinner downtown, and I remember shaking, like my whole body was shaking, and I just said it, and she's like, okay, like she's like, that makes sense. She said, you're such like an open person, like that makes sense for you.
Love whoever you love.
Yeah, and I just remember like my body was so hot. I just remember the relief, being able to breathe. I think I almost started crying, and she felt bad that I even had to feel like that. And then I told her, I was like, well, you know, growing up, you weren't super open. So I didn't know that I could tell you or I could ever tell you. And she even said herself, she's like, yeah, maybe at that time I wouldn't have been able to hear it in the way I can hear it now. I was about 20. And then, we went to Sweet Hut across the street, and we got a little pastry. She bought me like a little pastry as like a, you know, congrats kind of thing. And then every year now she sends me a picture of us at the Sweet Hut, and she's like, happy coming out day. And now she wears like proud mom shirts, and she'll argue with people about who are like transphobic and stuff. And she's so in it now. Like, she's arguing with like her friends. She goes hard for me now.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I know.
Oh my gosh.
In like good ways too.
Yeah.
And like sadness, like in the sense of the idea of my kids being so scared to tell me anything makes me so sad.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, I tell my kids a lot, what's the worst that I'm going to do? Yeah. I'm like, give me a consequence, or you might like take away my video games or TV. I'm like, that is the worst that I'm going to do. And you may have to sit in a lecture. Like, I will sit and talk to you, and we're gonna talk about our feelings, and I'll tell you how I feel about the situation, and I'm gonna push you to tell me how you feel about it. Like, that is the worst. Yeah. Like, mommy's never going to like leave you. I'm not gonna disown you. You're not gonna get a spanking. You're not getting any of that. I'm not gonna love you any less. I really want them to know like what the worst is going to be, which is sit through a lecture, and like how hard is it? I make them sit through lectures all the time where I'm like, why it's so important to like learn and be in school, and like I want you to make more money than I do, and I want you to be smarter than
table. How to put lotion
but
on
you created that safe space for them, and now they know. I think my mom, she was really sad that I felt that way, but she also was like, but I didn't give you that space. I think it took her a while while to realize it, even like to this day, but she's like, I know I, you know, did some things wrong and I didn't give you that space. Like, she didn't provide that like comfort. I truly did not know what was going to happen if I ever came out.
She didn't say out loud, you know what, whoever you are and no matter how you're living your life, like my love for you never is going to change.
No.
Out loud.
Yeah.
And my kid knows that, like out loud.
I think it's really important to provide that for them.
I think we all know how it feels to be alone, whether or not if you feel like your parents would be there for you for a certain thing. And so to be able to proudly say, Mom, me and my mom, we could be going to jail together because she's fine for me. And like kind of that thing that feels really, really good. We'd be like, I'm going to bail you out. If I'm not in jail with you, I'm definitely going to bail you out.
And she's also educating herself. Like she's not, and I mean, I'm always down to, but she's like, I just learned this thing. Or like, I just learned that this person uses they, them pronouns. And she's told me about like, people or celebrities who've like changed their pronouns before I knew. And I'm like, oh, thank you, Mom, because I didn't know that. My partner uses they, she pronouns, and my mom is really like, she will like make sure to say it. And if she doesn't like make it this big thing where she's like, oh, I'm so sorry, don't get mad at me. Like she switches it really quick, keeps going. And I am just like in awe of the 180 because it was so different growing up. Aww. So the change that she made was incredible.
Kids are reading the room. Like kids are experts at reading the room. So they're always thinking through from every little experience that they're having. Am I safe? Am I not? They overheard you talking about not wanting to listen to a certain artist anymore. Or in my house, it was like gay media was like equivalent to really harmful, hurtful, bad. Like this is off limits. You're going to become like a tainted person or 100%. Yeah. You'll be like, this is going to make you, you know, impacted in a negative way. Yeah. Being exposed to the LGBTQ community. Yeah. And like, so you hear that stuff. Like I internalized and had no idea as someone who came out to myself as a grown adult. It was of course, completely off my radar.
Yeah, and I don't
but I heard that and I absorbed that, and not just in how I perceived the world, but since I identify in the queer community and LGBT community, it was how I perceived myself. Yeah. And I didn't know. It's not like a conscious thought, but my little 7-year-old self was like, oh, these people are harmful. These people are breaking families apart. These people are confused. They're mentally unwell. Like, it's not my 8-year-old has read something, or I was too woke in my parenting and now they think they're trans. Like, probably it's your kid just asking, like, why is that person a boy or a girl? Can you explain that to me, Mom? But it's those little early questions and how you respond then that's helping them form their view of self, world, peers, others. Like, and it can either be a supportive, open-minded conversation where at the end of it, no matter what answer you offer them, they walk away thinking like, if I have more questions like this, my parents are someone I can talk to. Yeah. Or it's, when I brought that up, my parents were threatened. My parents were upset. My parents were judgmental. They were afraid.
Or saying mean words.
Yes.
I have personal experience with other parents that I know who their children have come out, and that child was so afraid to come out to them because their parents were so opposed to people of the LGBTQ community. Yeah. And so much so that now their relationship is so strained because even though the parents are really, really trying, it doesn't matter because everything traumatizes this child so much where even one little mistake where, you know, like how you said to your mom, like, oh, sometimes like she misgenders my partner every once in a while, but she is not on purpose and she'll just keep it moving. Yeah. That if something were small little happen with this this parent and this child, that this child would be like, you hate me and I already know how you feel. That it really has gotten it to be such a big deal. It's really changed their relationship in such a bad, I would say in bad negative way. I'm hoping that it changes because I truly wish for all parents to have relationship with their children. Yeah. But like this child had heard so many negative things in their home about being like people who are part of the LGBTQ community. And I'm pretty sure this person knew for a really, really long time that when they finally decided, because they were fully out of the home before they told their parents.
Yeah, which is so common.
Which is, I had to make sure I was safe
for your own safety. Yeah. What are you going to do if you share that with your parent and you're 15 and your parent has a really intense response and they're like, okay, now you're not watching these shows. They lock down to protect you and your life kind of like sucks after. It breaks your relationship or impacts it. It feels like everything will change. They feel differently about you. You can never take it back. And you live under their roof. They drive you places. They buy your clothes for you. Like, your real material needs are impacted if you come out in an unsafe environment. So lots of people wait till they're out of the home.
So I have a Reddit story here, and I really wanted to read it. And it says, how would or do you talk to your children about trans and non-binary identities? So with that, my kid's wife and I are going to go apple picking with our best friend from high school and her partner, Connor. Connor does not identify as a gender and uses pronouns they, them. We haven't seen them since past pre-pandemic. However, this time, our oldest son is almost 7, much more curious and intelligent than he was when we last saw them. We wanted to try and brace them on being respectful and using proper pronouns for Connor, even though from this point of view, Connor might present as a man. So we had a talk about Connor and how they do not identify as a gender. The opportunity to have the conversation kind of popped up, so we weren't as prepared to articulate some of the more complicated aspects of gender identity so a 7-year-old can understand. But what we basically said to him was that everyone is born with a sex, mostly grounded in their DNA and genitals. As a person gets older, learns more about themselves and the world around them, they begin to develop a gender identity. Society has traditionally tried to fit everyone into 2 genders, male and female, but people are more complicated and there are so many things that inform who we are. For some people, identifying as a man, woman doesn't work for them because all the things people think that they think man or woman doesn't properly capture who they are. And for trans people, it's more that they do identify as a gender, but it doesn't match the sex that they were born with. So they have to deal with growing into the person they were meant to be. He asked a ton of very innocent questions, understandable questions, and we did the very best that we could to answer them. He seemed content with our explanations and not very concerned with this issue. His main takeaway about it was nothing to do with the complexities of gender versus sex. What he took away was, we don't be rude to others and call them names that they don't want to be called. And so he was happy to call Connor Connor or they them. I would love to hear if any dads have had this comment with their kids. How did it go with them? Does anyone have thoughts on simple ways to explain lifestyles that perhaps your children are not directly exposed to on a regular basis, so that we can have more of an understanding / accepting when they do get exposed? I think the parent did a really, really good job.
Yeah.
I'm kind of jealous because I think they might have did a better job than I did.
That's really good.
Like really, really, like some of the explanations, like they did a really, really good job. I don't know.
And this is the foundation that I took when explaining to my parents.
Yeah.
I don't think there was my parents had no context of the difference between biological sex, gender identity, what is gender as like a social construct. I don't think they knew there was a separation between someone's like genitalia and their gender and what is gender as a construct. And to explain that to them was a novel idea. Yeah. Working towards helping them understand non-binary and people that use they, them. Mm-hmm. Not only was that off their radar, but they didn't know there was a difference. And that's a great starting point that this person just like simple, plain and clear.
Yeah. They did a great job.
The biggest takeaway is just being nice to them and treating them with kindness. And I love that child saw that, because that means that parent has done a really good job and in like teaching their child to just be kind to people who may not be like them or may not think like them.
I think when I've talked to people that are hesitant about introducing this topic to children, something that I've heard come up is like, but then my child won't have any space to like, it'll be wrong or bad to just be straight or to just be like, they're going to feel some sort of shame about their identity or some sort of, and I'm like, that's just not a thing. It's not a thing. And as parents, I don't think we have to worry about that. Inclusivity estranges people. The very definition of being inclusive is that there is space for you to be your beautiful self, and there is space for your neighbor or the person next to you to be their beautiful self. And we're going to lead with compassion and we're going to lead with integrity, right? Yeah. And so you're not having to, like, you're not losing your rights or your autonomy by like
respecting
using inclusive pronouns or using the name, because hopefully that person from that identity is doing the same for you. Yeah. And you have a right to ask for that too. And there's space for all of those things. And children are incredibly capable of all of those nuances and all. I mean, their whole life is nuanced, right? Teaching them about the most basic things they have no framework for already And we that are wrapped up in like, oh, this is a political issue or this is a big religious issue, they don't have frameworks or concepts of that. No. So however you choose to introduce it to them is their idea of if this is filled with shame, if this is weird, if this is awkward. If you're feeling some sort of big way about the topic, they're going to pick up on that way more than what you're actually saying out of your mouth. They're like, oh, this makes my parent feel weird. Yeah. And so it must be a weird thing to be or to talk about. It's shameful. It's private. Like, because I can tell when people have just the talk about sex in general, kids are picking up on all of that. And this is like a whole new layer of, do you guys have insights on, or what are your thoughts on like making that a more, what work can you do if you're listening to this and you're like, okay, I know that I have my own debunking of biases or whatever it is. Like, what might a parent do if they want to have these types of conversations, but when they think about it, it makes them feel like clammed up or they don't know how to approach it or they're afraid it'll all come out.
They need to unpack the issues that they have themselves before they try to have a conversation with their kids. Yeah. Because I definitely feel like, and I hope my husband doesn't like feel too weird about me saying this. Even when we were talking about him and his brother, I realized like I was so okay with a lot of things. And my husband was like, so uncomfortable with some things, and I recognized the reason for it was because he saw his brother go through a lot of just crap. Like, you know, people were really homophobic 10, 15, 20, and I'm trying to think 30 years ago, right?
Absolutely.
And so he saw his brother go through
the
a
word
lot.
Gay meant stupid.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think my husband seeing a lot of the trials that his brother went through, like, no one really wants that for anybody, right? Yeah. But especially if you see your own sibling going through that in the same way that my husband knew that his brother was gay for a really long time, because his mom, when he came out to his mom, it was kind of like, oh, yeah, we kind of knew. Like, I'm glad that even though they always knew, it was also really hard for them. I'm not harder than what he had to go through, but seeing someone you care for going through a lot of that, I think was really, really hard. And so Drew had to I think he had to unpack a lot of stuff himself. And so then fear and all this stuff. So then having to talk to your kids who you are like your whole job is like to protect them and love and care for them. It is kind of scary. So I'm not going to try to sit here and be like, it's totally easy and you should just do it. It'll come so natural. Right? I think society's kind of pushed us to not make it a natural thing because you're supposed to be straight anyways. Yeah. And you're not supposed to talk about it because there's no other option. And it's not very natural. I'm hoping one day it'll be very natural. Yeah. And it'll be like kind of like an easy thing for everybody to talk about. But right now, where we are right now in society is not very like natural. It is kind of difficult and awkward sometimes. And I think parents should learn how to unpack the issues that they have with themselves, ideas, but also it shouldn't be one conversation. Yeah. It should be lots of little talks that are less informal.
Yeah. I never thought about it in that way of like the way that your husband reacted to it. You assume that if someone is kind of uncomfortable in those conversations because they're homophobic or because they're whatever, but like, no, it was like, I saw my brother go through so much bad stuff pertaining to this that like I have a natural like anxiety around, or I have a natural just like I don't want you to go through that kind of thing. I never thought about it that way. But I would also say, on top of unpacking your own stuff, that's something really big that we talk about when we do these kind of like trainings to people who work in DFACs. Like, you need to make sure you unpack your own stuff. I would also say like find your own resources too. Like I feel like nowadays there's so many resources. There's YouTube videos, there's books, there's like websites. There's so many TikToks. I put TikToks in our presentations because it'll be like quick TikToks of like how to make your home more LGBTQ plus comfortable or affirming, things like that. Yeah. Like just finding your own resources to like educate yourself. And I think once you become more comfortable with the topic, you'll become more comfortable talking to your kid about the topic. And I fully agree. Like, not everything has to be so formal. Like, sit down. It could be like, you're in the car, they ask you a question, you answer the question. Or, you know, you then start to make sure that, you know, the shows that are on have more LGBTQ characters or the things you watch, what you listen to. I feel like there's a lot more books now. My best friend for my goddaughter, I feel like there's so many books now that I see books that you could, that literally say it exactly in a way that like kids would be receptive to and would understand it. And it's like a great way to have the conversation. So just like those little resources, and those books literally say it exactly in the way that like you
just read them as the nighttime story versus
Yeah.
like this weird, come on, honey, we're gonna like have a conversation about some special little people that live out in the world, is so like contrived versus it's just integrated into your library. And if they have a question, you can point there and say, we have a book on that. That may help us understand better. Let's pull it out.
I have my book wall, and then I just leave the books on there, and they're always able to just walk in there. So to not make it a big deal, we have a bunch of them, and so then randomly my daughter will just randomly pull a bunch of books every night to read because I think she's trying to surpass her brother's like reading level. But she like bought like 5 books, and one of the books were books on LGBTQ activists. It's like a little book. I could show it. I'll probably like share it in like the description or whatever. And it was just like a little book. It was like this big, and it's really pretty. And it was just but a bunch of activists and from the past and current ones. And it was sharing about their past, so like where they were born, anything like that, and then the things that they did to further help the LGBT community. And it's just like a little book, and then I just have a bunch of books like that. I even have a book, I think it's like Making a Baby, where it tells you where it's like, oh, sometimes it's a man and woman, but sometimes it's just like there also it's a very it's not, I would say it's not like a very like talking about male or female. It's just talking about sperm and egg. And it also talks about how there's other process. Sometimes it's not always female. Like it could be 2 moms and they're trying to figure out something. So in the book, it just talks about how babies are made. But it's in a very like kind of neutral way of just showing all the different ways babies are brought into this world. And so there are a lot of books that you can have and just put in your home, and your kids will start reading it to the point where it doesn't feel like this, like you can, and it may be like a lazy parent hack. You can kind of allow these books to kind of start the conversation. And then when your kids start asking you more questions, then you can read the book and ask more questions and talk about things together.
One of the best things my mom did for me growing up, and both my parents, is just say like, I'm not sure. I'm learning about this right now. Like if you're doing the work, because otherwise what came to mind when it was like, don't have the conversation till you're ready or till you've unpacked your stuff. Like that's a lifelong journey. And so you'll never have the conversation then. You'll never feel you know enough. You'll always feel it's a little awkward. So one thing that can be helpful is just say out loud to your kid, like, hey, mommy or daddy or parent is trying to learn more about different ways people are in the world. And it's a little confusing and scary to me too. And I'm working on it. And just end there. And if they have follow-up questions. You don't have to end there. You
can say, we can learn together.
I do that with my kids a lot. I'm unsure. And I'm trying to teach myself. And so if they have a question in the heat of the moment and you're drawing a blank or you're like panicking, just say, I'm not ready to answer right now. Can I circle back to you? I love that you asked that. Let's go on a date later this weekend and we can talk about that more. Or at the dinner table, after I've like had a second, I want to answer that for you, but like I can't right in this minute. Kids thrive with responses like that. And I think there's this pressure of like saying it right, having the answer.
You don't have to.
Yeah. And I think the thing about like making it more normal when you bring it, like making the conversations more normal, making them way more chill, not as formal. I think that also makes it a lot better when your kid does interact with someone who is LGBTQ in the world. Like they don't, it's not this like big, like they're just super like chill about it. They're very calm. It's not this like big thing that they have to make a big deal about.
Gay person. Yeah, I think they're trans, mom. Like,
it doesn't have to become that.
Man, that would be so awkward too if the kid was like that. Because there are parents who genuinely are trying, but because they've made it such a big deal, but that person's gay, and the kids like not doing anything wrong, but because they're taught in the way that they were taught from their parents, that it just becomes really awkward, and that parent's like super awkward, like sorry, because like there are a lot of things. Like I remember my kid when we were talking about like learning about our bodies.
Oh, it's
like
always
that.
They have a penis. Or
I have a penis,
and you're like they're learning. Sorry.
And so I think, like you said, just make it in a way that's not such a big deal that it can make it where it's going to be less awkward for everybody.
Everyone involved,
The way Gina has talked about this a lot when it comes to racial representation. And so do I have any best friends? Do I have anyone I'm closely associating with that is the same as my child, different than me, opening horizons, representative? I think coming from a more conservative background where there's a lot of fear around this topic, I often had heard, well, like we don't want to show those types of things because they're being like influenced to be gay. Like they're being made gay by talking about it so much. Yeah. Or you're not queer, so why would you be reading books and watching shows and showing it to your kid? And I'm like, okay, well, guess what? That 2 shows that you showed them in childhood amongst the 58 other shows that they were regularly watching is not going to be the tipping point. I can promise you that.
Your point about like having people around who are LGBTQ or having people around your kids that are Black or whatever, I think it's so important. It also, I would say, feels good as a person. Like I'm around my goddaughter, me and my partner are with her all the time, usually together. So like she sees us as like Gabby and Taylor, like that's like her thing. Yeah. And sometimes I even have to stop myself from this like internalized stuff. I'm like, oh my God, should she, if you kiss me in front of her, is that weird? Like, is that gonna, like, it's even like my own like internal stuff. I'm like, is my best friend who I've known for over 10 years, I'm like, is she gonna be okay with that? Like, is she really okay with
is PDA
us being with Carter?
Right? With
is she okay
child?
with like Carter knowing that we're together? Like we are together. It's not an issue at all, but it's like stuff that I've internalized myself that now I'm like, I need to unlearn that for myself. It's also so amazing that that's even a thing, that I can be that for her, that I can be that representation. And it's so normalized for her already, like so young.
And that someone she trusts and has been exposed to her whole life is modeling for her, not that she should be queer, but that if she ever were to be, it's a safe, healthy, natural thing to be. Yeah. And I will say how to have healthy, thriving relationships, because if you've never seen something modeled, then this is, I think, has been an issue in the past, hopefully less now, but like individuals that have never seen healthy relationships with their same sex, if they're, you know, homosexual, whatever it is, then that lack of representation can lead to higher instances of abuse or because you don't know how to be treated. You don't know what to expect. And you've never seen really thriving, healthy queer representation. Yes. Yeah. And I think that makes a difference.
There was a time that we had no representation and we still have people who are queer. Yeah. And so this idea of like, because we're pushing for this representation is going to push more children to want to be queer. It doesn't make any sense, because there were a time where we had like zero representation.
Or only, not even zero, all negative. Yeah. So not only you're not seeing them, you're seeing them and they're always the bad guy. They're the weirdo. So
then how is it where we didn't have any representation and the representation that we had was bad? Yeah. How is it that we still have people who are queer? And that's just because it is who you are, but it's not based on what you're watching and who's around you. Yeah. It really is that person who they were born to be.
What if it does make your kid more comfortable, or what if it does open their mind? Like why is that such a bad thing?
To explore yourself. Yeah,
it might. Then what?
And I think this is a pretty progressive generational thing, like within society, because what it feels to me is like people in a generation of people that are like 40 and younger, there's a much more progressive ideology around like it's okay to explore yourself, and it's okay to become more open-minded in some of these areas. And there's like, it was very threatening, I think, for generations before that. It was because we're, rooted in a lot of systems where that there's no space for that. And it is a binary, and the people that are in charge don't want any of those narratives. And because it's empowering to explore yourself, and empowered people are more threatening to those that want just like the structures to stay the same way they are.
Yeah. And wouldn't you want, and I'm not a parent, like, wouldn't you want your kids to like have a safe space to explore themselves, and you be that safe space so they can explore themselves and figure out like who they are? Like, I feel like you would want your kid to have that. Like, I wish I think
it comes down to an underlying belief of if who they are is actually healthy for them, or is like God's will for them if you're religious. And if you have a deeply ingrained belief that like being queer sends someone to hell, you would not want that for your child. And it's that personal ideology that can lead to fear, that can lead to like, I'm saving my child from who they think they are, to help them stay on the track of who they really are, or who God knows they are, and that's I think that gets so complicated, because I always ask myself that. I would want any young person to feel affirmed in the curiosity of becoming them. Who are they? And I can understand, I think, where like all that fear would come from. Or
actually, as a parent myself, I definitely can understand, because I think about like one of my kiddos who's like, I always worry about like her future and whether or not they'll be okay, because I know the statistics, and I worry. And so then you start to put these worries ahead of just like your child in a way. So you're like, so worried about what's going to be, instead of recognizing like, this is a child I have right now. Let me just help them and support them the way they need.
Yeah.
Instead of too worried too much about the future, just being there to support them. You really love your kids and you're really trying to make sure that they're set up for success. And if you've been always taught like, this is success.
Yeah.
This is the way you're going to
Yeah.
be like bad. It's more of a way of like, they're letting the fear take over their genuine love for their child.
Yeah.
So not that they don't love their child,
Yeah.
but it's like this fear. I don't want my kid to go through this. I don't want my kid to go to hell. I don't want my kid to have to
be estranged from the family.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to have to deal with the repercussions socially or in my friend groups or in our family of this child living this identity. So like, I'm going to just detract them from it consciously or subconsciously, because it's going to make also my life more complicated, and I'm not ready to go to bat. Like, I haven't quite sorted this all out.
Yeah.
And my child telling me that maybe they like girls, or maybe they don't feel like the sex they were assigned at birth, feels so big and foreign and unknown to me that I'm deeply threatened by it. So I'm just going to say like, you're not old enough to know that. Or I'm just going to say
Ignore
like,
it.
yes, you've been reading, you've been hanging out with the wrong friends. Like, and curtail it away. And that feels, I think there's space for that. It's not healthy, but it's understandable.
It's understandable.
Yeah.
I had a friend who came out to me and told me like, I would not wish this on anybody, because this having to go through this whole process of learning who I am, be okay with who I am, having family members disown me, not talk to me, not be invited.
Yeah.
It's not something that I would choose if I could choose it.
Yeah.
It's not something I would choose if I could choose it, if I could choose for my own kids, which was really hard to hear them say.
Yeah.
Because it made me realize, like, one, this is not a choice, right?
Yeah.
But then two, it made me realize like, as parents, we really put these ideas of what we want for our kids, and it's not bad. Yeah. It's not because we don't love our kids. It's just really because we care for our kids and probably care for them too much that we end up trying to steer their life and
curate
make choices.
a world for them.
Yes, curate a world. Like, I wish I could create I have a daughter who's like interested in art, and I'm like, she's gonna be like a struggling artist, and she's going to be like no food.
You're like painting this whole story.
I am painting it, literally.
Me and Drew are like, what are we gonna do? She's gonna be this struggling artist, just painting, trying to make money. And I'm like, can we put extra money in her trust fund? I'm like, I want to start a trust fund so she's not struggling. I want her to continue being an artist.
Her a life.
But I don't want her to starve. And it's like this idea of basically wanting to create this like world for our kiddos so that they're fine. And it's not that these people don't love their kids. It's just like they're not remembering that they're still human beings, that there are other people, that they are going to have their own lives. And so we forget to do that, and we just choose not to do that. And we're like, we're just going to do what we think is best without putting our kids first.
Yeah.
And I want to speak to, as someone who's like in my adulthood come into this identity, it feels for me that any elements of being a part of that community for me haven't been that I wouldn't wish them for myself, because nothing actually has made me happier. The parts that I'm like, I wouldn't have chosen this have come from societal frameworks, have come from like bigotry or bias or judgment that make my life much more complicated.
100%.
Make my self-perception much more complicated. But if we lived in a world where those things didn't exist, I wouldn't want nothing more than, I'm so proud of that part of my identity. I love and celebrate that part of myself. And so that's a huge piece of grief for those that we can all, I hope, collectively mourn that there are elements of being in the world that it's their most challenging part of who they are. And without the reflections they're getting back from others, it may be like the best part of who they are. And it probably is, but things make it so much more complicated where it's like, boy, my life would be so much easier if I just didn't have this component, right?
If I had to create my own family when I left home and went to college, and finding my queerness, I really found myself specifically finding Black queer friends. I had to realize that maybe white queer spaces weren't the best for me, and I had to go through all that kind of stuff. And then once I found other Black queer people, it was just comfort there that I never was able to feel. And I think even with family, I have family who I don't talk to anymore because of it, or family who do that thing where they say like, you know,
Tolerate
I
you.
would have been, yeah, like I would have been fine with it. Like, what are you talking about? But it's like, no, you would not have. I remember what you said growing up, like you wouldn't have, or like,
Yeah.
when my grandmother found out and she called my cousin and she was like, and I don't really talk to any of my family besides my cousin really. And she was like, grandma just called me. I thought you died. And I was like, what are you talking about? What happened? And she's like, because she said she was crying so hard on the phone that like, I thought something happened to you and I was freaking out. And I was like, crying because what? And she's like, she said that you were, she couldn't say it. She said you were living with a woman.
Oh, wow.
She couldn't say what was actually that you
the
were.
identity component.
Yeah. But she said you were living with a woman. And I was like, what? And apparently she called a lot of other people and did the same thing. And then when I didn't speak to her for a while, she was confused. Well, I don't really talk to her anyway, but when I really wasn't answering her call, she was kind of confused and I just needed a minute. And then once I did talk to her, she was like, well, you know, I could have been fine. I was fine with it. And I was like, people thought I died. Like, you were really upset about this. Like,
if it was big enough for her to call, basically make it like this like gossipy drama, she wouldn't have been okay with it.
No.
If that was like the context of like people think you were dying, it was gossip. Yeah. She's like, she couldn't even say the word like, no, my like granddaughter is gay or lesbian, and like she was like living with a woman because it's like it sounds like
that's happening,
it sounds
not
like the
identity.
60s or 50s where like the roommate kind of situation.
Yes, literally that.
If she couldn't even say that, then of course she would not have been okay with it.
I felt like true healing and true love from like friends who I now consider family that like I don't want or need what is there. So yeah, she did not react well.
One point that you are saying that really stands out to me is taking when someone has come out to you or someone has shared with you about their experience understanding their identity in any capacity. One thing I think that makes a safer space is considering that that's their story to tell. And are you the kind of person that now you need to like share that with all of your friends and you need to, and do you have the person who shared that with you's permission to do so? Were they ready for that? And I think it can come up as a parent, like I have the right to share information how I need to. And like, if I'm upset by it, calling someone sobbing, my child shared with me that they're gay or queer in any capacity, and I'm distressed by it. And I'm allowed as a person to reach out to my support networks. And like, is that allowed? Does that out that child? Is that a safe thing to do? But you're human too. Yeah. So as a parent, you're human. Who can you talk to? What is a safe, okay thing? And do you need to run that by your child if it's their business and their information?
Oh, for sure.
Or what if they say, no, I don't want you to share this with anyone. And like you are some sort of triggered or worried or afraid. What comes to mind for me to answer my own question is like Glennon Doyle shares some really good insights on this for coming out when she writes in her book Untamed about when she was going to share with her mother that she was leaving her heterosexual marriage to like be with a woman and to get married and have this thriving relationship. And she was like, when I shared it, I was met with significant fear because my mom loves me so much that it was like, how will people respond? You already have a following. You've published books. Like you're a public figure. I'm worried for you. And her response to that was like, I'm not looking for your worry, and that isn't helpful to me. That seems like a you problem. Yeah. And so I need you to take some space and not make your fear and your worry for me. Thank you. I hear you, but it's not like I don't need to be met with that. This is a happy part of my life and I'm thriving as I lean into this. And I shared this with you because I love you. Take the time you need to also be in a celebratory mindset. And if you're not there yet, like, I'm going to stay over here and take care of myself. And she has this whole moat island analogy that's really healing. And I couldn't agree more. I mean, that's a good boundary to have. And it's why some kids don't come out till they're adults because they don't have that autonomy to say, if you're responding poorly, like I need some space now because you're living in the same roof as them unless you're going to leave your house and be homeless at 15 or whatever, which kids do, right? If it's so troublesome after they've come out. But I think if someone were to be sharing that as an adult and you as an adult are having a hard time, from my perspective, some healthy places to go with that information is like, if you're partnered, hopefully with your partner, like I'm really overwhelmed that my child shared this. I'm hurt that they didn't say it sooner. You're allowed to have all those feelings. You are human too. You may have a whole bunch of feelings that come with that and they're valid too, but they're not your child's problem to hold for you, to fix for you. And so like that takes a lot of grace to navigate in that conversation, meeting your child with respect, with confidentiality, with support, and then like taking care of yourself outside of that relationship. And no one's modeling how to do that. Like, that's hard to find. Do you have a therapist? Like, do you have a best friend that will, hold space for you, but not share that information with anyone else? Like, where can you go as a parent without outing your child in inappropriate ways? Do you guys have any thoughts?
I probably would talk to a friend I'm really close to who is queer.
Yeah.
And I'm talking to them because they can either maybe help me, or if we're all really close, maybe they can also talk to my kid and helping them as well.
If you're talking to someone, you're saying, everything that's flooding my mind right now is like, what if my kid goes to hell? What if my family kicks them out? What if nobody loves them anymore? What if they can never find a partner? What if people hurt them in the streets when they see who they are? Like, those are valid things to be worried about as a parent. And to have someone who's not your child, you're projecting them on, another queer person can say, like, hey, that's valid and hold space for you. Or can say, you don't have to worry about it. They're going to be okay. Yeah. Don't project that on them. Like, can walk you through it, hopefully, in some
and
of those
may not
ways.
be able to walk you through. Like, maybe the things that you're saying could trigger something that they went through when they were coming out, or that their parents said to them, or like that they just like aren't in the space to like hear or help you through, which is valid. But then again, I think I agree. Like a therapist, a counselor, your partner. I know that some states and like cities have like support groups even for like parents who have like kids that are
Google
coming
that
out,
shit.
Like
find a community.
So many
parents will sometimes get really lazy and expect people to give them the resources.
Yeah.
And like, it's like, you're an adult. You have like one of like the most powerful devices in your hand at all times. Like you said, Google it. You can find a lot of information.
Watch some YouTube video.
You can find out so much information, but also too, there are a lot of information from like very respectable places that you can feel very comfortable with like learning from. And then from there, I'm sure you'll even learn even more. But like, I guess I get tired a lot of the times, even as an adopted parent. A lot of people like ask me information, like questions about some things. And like the biggest thing is always like hair care, right? And then like, I didn't know this and I don't know, where can I find that? And I'm like, the same like phone that you texted me on, sending me messages on Instagram and on in comments and DM.
Yeah.
You could be asking the same questions to like Google. I mean, even Bing it. I mean, ask Jeeves. I don't care, but ask somebody. Like, you don't have to like wait for me to give you the answer and then be like, well, Gina never gave me the answer, never DM'd me, so I never did it, so it was Gina's fault. No, it's not. Yeah. Like, let's not be lazy, because the same way where I had to learn how to like take care of my kid who was completely different from me. If your kid is different from you because they're LGBTQ or different race or whatever, you have to do the work, because that's what you did when you sign up to be their parent. You sign up to like learn about them and be the parent in the way that they need to be.
But also, I think it is good sometimes to learn from your kid, to have those conversations with your kid. Maybe your kid just came out and you're both learning and you both want go to your first Pride together, or you want like, like you guys can learn together, grow together. But also there's a line too, because your kid may also be learning. They may not, and they aren't the spokesperson for everyone. They don't have the answers either themselves. And so but I do agree. Like, I deal with this a lot when it comes to working with like defects. Like, people don't do I'm like, if you actually did care and you actually wanted to be a support for this child, then you would do the work.
I read another one. And this goes back to one of the conversations we had a little bit earlier. There needs to be same-sex couples in children's shows. They're not making your kids gay. You're just homophobic. I'm not going to get too deep into this, but this has been bothering me since the whole Arthur's teacher marrying a man thing went on.
The great debacle of
Mr. Ratburn.
I feel like I remember this. Yeah.
Mr. Ratburn, we found out like he was gay, which I don't know if I feel like because I watch Arthur a lot. I was one of those kids that was raised on PBS.
5 p.m.
Zoom.
PBS.
I know, right?
My mom's thinking dinner. I'm like, Arthur.
I'm trying to think if anything ever indicated to me that Mr. Ratburn was gay. Other than him never having, like, technically, if you think about it, he never had anybody. Everybody else had like a partner or a spouse, right?
But also, you were seeing him in a school environment.
That's true.
So how would we know his partner? He's just like their teacher.
Yeah,
so it makes sense.
True. I guess,
but
it's
it was the outrage of like, how dare they?
Mad when they found Mr. Ratburn.
Arthur,
like Mr. Ratburn's gay. Ban Arthur. Okay, no matter what you think of homosexuality, there needs to be representation. You can teach your kids whatever you want, morally wrong or not. That's your choice as a parent. But with same-sex couples having children, it is something that is around us. Just imagine your kid is in kindergarten. They meet a friend and they realize that they have 2 dads or 2 moms. With only seeing heterosexual couples in media and shows, it can be confusing, and it can make the kid of the same-sex relationship face hardship/bullying. Kids seeing that some people have mom/dad or two dads/moms would make it easier to explain in the long run, in my opinion. I don't want my child exposed to any sexual situations, gay or straight, but having a show or characters that can open the mind and perspective of others that live different from yourself is beneficial.
Okay, right out of the gate. The fact that they had to say, this is worth noting in my book, I don't want my child exposed to things of sexual nature. Like, clearly, I hope we're all on the same page that small children should not be watching sexual acts. But disproportionately, gay and LGBTQ couples are sexualized.
Yes.
So it's like, oh, when I learn that those two people are together, I'm only thinking about they have sex together.
Yeah.
Versus people, when they see a man and woman together, they love each other. This is a supportive partnership. That's a thriving family.
Well, it's up until you get married and they're like, you're bumping stuff because now we know you're pregnant. That's the only time I feel like people sexualize it. But other than that, I think you are right.
No, 100%.
I'm thinking about my child is like too sensitive and vulnerable and naive to be exposed to the fact that two women would be having. I'm like, two women.
They're not
love
even like
each
getting
other.
there in it. They're not even.
Why is this sexual?
Yeah, it's like you're sexualizing it. That's your issue.
Yes.
Like that's not like just a gay couple or lesbian couple or whoever being on TV isn't inherently sexual. Like
they're
that's
offering
your
love
issue.
in a partnership. Exactly.
Yeah, it's exactly what it is when you have a mom and a dad or whoever on a show. Are you looking at them like they're just super sexual?
How
No.
inappropriate that child is watching them go into the same bedroom at night versus if it's a gay couple. That's what
we need to watch. I Love Lucy. They were separate beds.
Yeah, that's what we need. We go back to the 50s and 60s of keeping it straight laced, y'all. We should not know that people sleep in the same bedroom. Yeah. That is taboo.
But I guess you're right.
But for gay people, it's always over sexualized. That's a common theme that happens.
Mm-hmm. And isn't it? I mean, I may be wrong, but isn't it more sexualized for women who are like lesbian couples? It's always way more sexualized for them.
People fetishize it. I'll be completely frank. People of all gender and sexual orientation spectrums find some sort of something about women with women, and that's just, it's really sad that for someone to find love with who they want to find love with, that because of your perspectives on what is interesting, whatever, quirky, exciting, that they're now a sexual icon together for just finding love together. It's just, and that's common. My parents would always comment, they're big hand holders and they've been together for, 36 years or whatever. Yeah. And they're very PDA, we're together. Mm-hmm. They show that. And I just remember distinctly having told to me in my formative years how wrong it is to see that like LGBTQ people are somehow projecting a message or trying to get people to be more like them. There's always this gay narrative, or what was it called? Like the gay agenda, right? Yeah. That is a real thing that I was raised believing was a thing. 100%. Gay people are trying to get everyone else to be gay, or gay people are trying to like prove something by just existing.
So just our existence is like a political state. Like it means something that's like that you're putting onto it. And I will say like there's a lot more with like, gender and queerness is political and things like that. And that's not what like we're talking about here. Just mostly like two people in a same-sex couple existing on a TV show does not mean it's like inherently deeply sexual thing. And like it is different. Like a mom and mom is going to be a different relationship. It's going to be a different dynamic, but not an inherently sexual dynamic.
Not about
and
what's
like
happening in the bedroom.
No, and I agree. And the same with like me and my partner. Like I don't think I realized until I was actually like I dated women, whatever. But like when I was actually in a serious relationship with someone where I was like, oh, like I really look around when we hold hands. Like we really don't do PDA. Like we really like we just got back from vacation. We're like we have to be really careful about if you kissed me or if you gave me a hug. Like I was always looking around
on a cruise. Yeah.
Where am I safe being a Black woman? Or where am I safe being with my partner? Like there's so many different layers to it. Yeah.
I can imagine what you're going through as a queer Black woman, having to like think about all that stuff, because I remember just planning a simple vacation where I was trying to get my brother and his fiance like, let's go on a trip. And we're like, oh, let's go to the Caribbean. It's not expensive. And he's like, oh, we can't go to Jamaica. We can't go here. We can't go there. And he's like telling us like, nope. Yeah. And I'm here. I'm like,
for being gay.
And I was like, here's someone. It's so cheap. Like, let's go. And he's like, no, I really can't. Like, you want us to die? And like, okay, yeah, no, I don't. Yeah. And right. And I feel bad for even thinking like, oh, but it's so cheap, right? But
it's like off your radar.
Yeah, it's off my radar, which is sad to me because it shouldn't be off my radar. When he was sitting there and me and Drew were like thinking about it, we talked about it afterwards, where I'm like, man, Drew, I didn't think about that. I didn't think about how many countries that they can't visit because we like to like, sometimes I don't think about like how certain countries you can't go to.
Yeah.
Or you maybe you can.
But you think about it like racially, you know, like it's like those things where I was talking about it with Courtney in the car because we were talking about how eventually we both want to like live outside the country. And it's like I already have to think about like, okay, where could I go to be safe as a Black woman? But now it's like, oh, where can I go to be safe with my partner? Like where, and like watching like TikToks and people, and I see videos
I watch the same ones.
Yeah, where they're like, okay, these are where you can go when you're LGBTQ. And then some of the comments are like, okay, but what if you're Black?
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, at least you can go if you're Black. It's like, what if yeah, there's not, and I really want to find like someone who is saying, where can you go when you're LGBTQ and Black?
Oh, I started following those people because we started talking about countries that we want to go to move or something ever happening safe for both of us, because we're like, we're gonna just live in on a commune. And I started following certain people. I'll see if I can send them to you, but it was the very same thing where I would see people will say, oh, here are the places you can go and where you can feel safe if you're Black, and then I would find another person, here are the places you can go if you're queer, and I was like, but I need both, right?
Because not only did I have to like come out, then I had to deal with it in like my Black spaces too, and like then I had to understand like what that was like. I guess so there's a common solidarity amongst Black people, but then once you add in like queerness, it's like it's
a new bubble has
and I noticed I learned a lot of the times that I got to the point where I was so tired of it, but a lot of times like in college and growing up and stuff, I had to like bring in the topic of like race for them to understand the topic of sexuality. Like I had to be like, oh well, you know, as Black people we go through this, like same thing if you're queer, like not even same, a little worse because like you Black and queer, and like once I did that, people were like, oh, okay.
Like related to the thing that they have experienced.
Yes, because then they kind of are able to understand it. And I did go through a phase where I was like, okay, I'm tired of doing this. Like, I'm tired of, you should just be able to get me. Like,
Gabby, you were like the epitome of educator. You're out here schooling all the people, doing all the emotional labor.
I was just like, I hated having to relate to race for them, because for me, it was like, not that I didn't get that chance, but like, I don't know, it's such a niche kind of like place that I'm at being like a Black queer woman, but I also, it's really nice when I am in places with other Black women specifically where like they're like, oh yeah, I get it, like I can understand this part, and I also don't really understand that part, and like I understand that like, you know, I'm 2 steps ahead, you may be 4, like you may be looking at things that I'm not, and like I specifically with Black women, it's a little easier, like there's like something common in there that is just inherent and like really comfortable, I would say.
If there was one thing that you feel like you would want either your mom or like if you could teach any parent who may have a child who is queer in their home or who's just trying to prepare themselves on the off chance, because I think like
you can't know.
Like you can't know, because like for me right now, I've never like been trying to prepare myself in the sense of like, oh, I'm going to have one, but it's just like if I do, then I want to be prepared, so that way I'm not having to unpack a bunch of stuff while my child's trying to unpack a lot of stuff. I want to unpack it before it, like, so I could be there fully for them, mentally, physically, be there for them. What would you want your parent or a parent who's currently listening right now, what would you wish that they could have like done or know so that they could be prepared in that chance that they do need to be prepared?
I would say, and it sounds so vague, but like, I really like the point that was made of like leading with kindness and like always being like open, just being like, okay, well, you know, just be kind to them, and you know, they may have different pronouns than you, that's fine, and like that's just who they are, but also like be really careful about what you say. I don't think parents may realize like how much your kids are going to internalize, and like being careful about, you know, like how with my mom, like saying like what I can't listen to or what, you know, I can't watch, things like that, or like this is, or like your reaction to seeing 2 men or whoever, your reaction to seeing queer people, like your kids are gonna like take that in, and even queer or not, they're gonna take that in, and that's how they're gonna either react to other queer people or feel about themselves. I think that part is really important. And also, I would think the normalcy of it, like creating that safe space and making it just seem normal. Like, hey, like, you know, there's gay people on TV, that's totally normal. You may have a gay friend, that's so like that's not a big deal. I think the normalization of it, because sometimes it can be like a thing where like all eyes on you, you know, and when someone finds out, it's like you're the person that answers the questions, everything's on you, or like, did I say this thing wrong, I'm so sorry, like don't get mad at me, stuff like that. But like just normalizing it more, I would say it would be really helpful. So I think those things.
Well, what are some ways that you feel like parents could normalize it? Like maybe just give 2 examples, because I didn't know there's so many different examples, right? Like what are like a way that you maybe that you've seen with your own goddaughter or child that you saw that they normalized that you really, really appreciated, because it was like such a small way, but also made such a huge impact.
Yeah, I would say, and she's so young, so there's only so much they can do right now, but for sure, like in the media that she consumes, it's super open, super diverse in all ways, diverse racially, diverse with sexuality, and just, you know, even going out of your way to find things that do have like gay people in them, like making sure that they do watch that and they are into it, or, you know, whatever. And then also even like having queer people around you, not just around you just to be there, but like people that you love and that you have relationships with, like, and that have relationships with your kids, and that you show your kids that you're really comfortable having them around them. Like you love having them around, like having queer people around, I would think is like really important.
Basically in a way of not like kind of tokenizing them just to be there, but like
they're
actually
integrated.
have genuine relationships that you feel like, hey, like I could see, because I talk about this with, in the same way, like the way you like hate having to like relate this to like race, but like I tell a lot of adoptive parents, like you should have, if you have a child of a different race in your home, you should have a genuine friendship with someone of the same race as your child. So that way they see it in a way of like you genuinely, like you can call them up and be like, my kids are acting up a fool today. And you talk, your kids see that and you want the same thing. You're basically saying that you should have true, genuine friendships with someone who are part of the queer community, that your kids are not, it's not tokenize them in any way.
And just like in general, I think constantly educating yourself, like not like you have to go read like some like super scholarly book, like you know, but like just like educating yourself, because that can even impact like in little ways how you talk about things, in little ways how you react to things if you did see a gay person or whatever. Like it can influence like your behavior, and that can then influence your kids, and they see it, that's how you react when you familiarize yourself with it more and you're more comfortable with it, and then that in turn just makes your kid more comfortable with it.
I would love to hear more about your nonprofit that you're working for. If you want to share.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So I work for MAAC. It stands for Multi-Agency Alliance for Children. And we just support youth in foster care. There's multiple different ways. We have totally different programs. Some programs work with like mental health. Some programs work with empowerment. So, you know, helping kids in foster care, you know, be their own advocates, go to the Capitol and like advocate, stuff like that. I specifically work in education. So, you know, supporting kids in foster care with their education, getting them a tutor, making sure that schools are being nice to them and they're being treated the same, getting them school supplies, making sure they can go to prom, stuff like that. So yeah, if you ever like want to go to our website and donate, it all goes back to the work that we do with the kids. But yeah, we just partnering with other agencies and partnering with other programs within our agency to just support kids in foster care in the best way.
Do you have a social media page that if anyone?
Oh yeah, I do. My what is it? My Instagram and everything is just Gabby, Gabby, and then SUSS. So yeah, follow me there.
Yeah, and thank you for your time.
Yeah,
I feel like your insights.
This is amazing. I had a great time. Yeah,
are so appreciated. Your time contributing is invaluable.
And I really, really appreciate you.
Thank you. I appreciate that too. And I also am a co-leader of the SOGI committee, which stands for Sexual Orientation, Gender Identity, and Expression. And so if you guys need like some resources that you want to like put out in the descriptions or whatever, I can send you over some stuff, some great links that have been really helpful.
There'll be a lot of parents who are wanting more information, more resources.
Yeah.
We're not going to be lazy parents, right, guys?
Yeah. You're going to find your own, not just Gabby's.
Yeah. But yeah, I definitely have some great links to share. And yeah, I really appreciate y'all having me.
Yeah.
It's been great. Yeah.
I think that's it. Yay, we did it.
That's a wrap.
Yay.